have three wonderful guests, Lara Lotti, Callum Bowden, Penny Rafferty. Lara is also part of the sphere. She is a transfuge and involved in many projects. Callum is, I know him as part of Trust, a fantastic co-working space in Berlin. And Penny, I mean, since I've been in Berlin, I've heard about her in so many ways. She's a very involved artist, I would say quite politically involved. And it's really a pleasure to have you three here today to present Black Swan project.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And yeah, it's great to be here with so many friends and collaborators. Shall I share my screen? I don't know if I have sharing access already. Okay. So how do I, oh, one second. Oops. Okay. Here we are. So this is Black Swan. Black Swan is a digital tool that allows groups of artists to decide how to use resources together. It's that's us, the current team, with Penny Rafferty, Callum Bowden, me, Andre Fincaro, and Late Benkeda. And in this presentation, we are going to go through a bit of the background research for Black Swan. We're going to quickly go through the experiments that we conducted at Trust in January and our findings. And then we'll discuss the result, the fruit of our working group with Signet, an interface for a quadratic voting web app that we're currently prototyping. Maybe before we get immediately into the research, I don't know if Penny wanted to introduce the origin of Black Swan, given that it's fairly it's an experiment that has been ongoing for quite a few years.
Thanks, Laura. So yes, basically Black Swan became a kind of concept in around 2017 here in Berlin. And although Laura introduced the current team, actually there's a lot of people who are involved in the Black Swan conception. And that also doesn't just go towards a team, but also because Black Swan is predominantly being built on conversations. So in a way it was coming out of a need rather than purely an experimentation of using alternative technology. It was very much based in a Berlin perspective. In around 2017, a lot of people began asking questions about what was going to happen to the Berlin art scene, impending gentrification problems, and also the inaccessibility for new forms and diverse and intersectional people to access funding. So in a way, the Black Swan ideology kind of came out from this unfunctional art pedagogy. And in a way, this was the kind of fundamental basis of trying to create a kind of paper prototype of using a decentralized autonomous organization in order to potentially at least begin talking about how to remove some of these gatekeepers from the art world and begin putting the tools and the resources into the user's hands. So as much as we hope to actually make Black Swan more translocal, I think it is important to say that it is actually coming from a very local body and kind of response unit, and also peers that have been working within the Berlin art scene.
Thank you. And Yeah, Penny already introduced the context, the R context, and what are the current needs and the current problematics. I guess a lot of us here like share the same kind of concerns regarding the fact that artists today compete for fewer and fewer resources and opportunities. Newer practices are not well served by existing support structures and funding frameworks as well. Art, on the other hand, has always been a collaborative practice. So this is highly, in opposition to the current logic, I guess, of like highly competitive funding applications. And also the fact that institutions should share technologies and platforms instead of building silo solutions to the same problems and problems that every groups of creative practitioners share today, basically. A few words about blockchain and the approach that we've taken to blockchains in our process so far. So blockchains enable local, translocal value transmission, which is probably the most interesting and important thing for us. They make DAOs possible, which are automated organizations that are run by their members. On the other hand, blockchains are also complex technologies. They require quite expert knowledge to use. And the financial rewards that enable blockchains to work in a decentralized manner can be expensive to use and with different prices at different times. So currently, the approach that we've taken is really about using blockchain as a tool for the imagination. So blockchain thinking without the technology itself for the moment. So our question, the question that has guided our process is really about how can we enable groups of artists to work together and take control of resources and opportunities. And this is the question that guided our experiment. So in our experiment at Trust, which is, as Rick was mentioning, a shared workspace based in Berlin for the research, development, and maintenance of shared infrastructures and imaginaries. Callum, would you like to say a few more words about Trust?
Sure. I mean, we have a shared workspace in Berlin-Schöneberg. We produce live stream events. We run an online community on Discord, and we collectively develop experimental open source digital platforms that often are based on creating social environments.
And I guess one other important aspect of Trust is that the type of creative practitioners that compose like the community around it. It's often the type of creative practitioners that currently fall between the cracks of, say, institutional frameworks. And this is also one of the needs, one of the aspects that really has got us to try and develop and think about alternative ways for these type of practitioners to share resources and organize differently than what is currently possible. So the working group was generally supported by Goethe Institute, Serpentine Gallery, Furtherfield, and Trust, obviously. This is us, some of our members. In December 2020, Black Swan invited 9 Trust members to be part of this working group to role play and test different voting mechanisms and distribution mechanisms, and also test our own assumptions about decentralized governance and how would people use it. I guess one of the important aspects, like with the sphere, the challenge for us is try and use blockchain mechanisms to support communities that already exist. So it's quite the opposite than, I guess, the current trend within the blockchain space of creating communities around the token. This is very much the opposite approach, the opposite problem. So in our working group, we met for a month, and we used mostly the Trust Discord for communication. The Trust Discord was facilitated by the Swan bot, which was Callum for a month role-playing the role of a bot. And also importantly, we had a funding pot of about €1,000 that we used for these 3 different pools to test these different voting mechanisms that we'll show in a second. The group met monthly and met weekly for a month, and you can see here our timeline. And for the first 10 days, we solely focused on creating proposals. And importantly, our working group participants didn't really know each other in person. So it was also nice to test the type of collaborations that would come out of this, experiment. And it was really amazing that just within 10 days, 16 proposals were submitted, often coming out of collaborations that were just forged during these 10 days. So that was already quite amazing. So the 3 voting mechanisms that we wanted to test in this period were quadratic voting, emoji vote, and a lottery veto mechanism. So we don't need to discuss quadratic voting too much into details, I guess, since we just had a really great presentation by Sarah. But this is just to show, again, we didn't really rely on any esoteric technology to test this mechanism. This is just a screenshot of the Excel spreadsheet that we used for the quadratic voting round, basically. Then within the Trust Discord, we also created different channels, one for the emoji voting, and this is the Swan bot explaining how that would work. So each person had 1 vote with the Swan emoji, and the proposal with the majority of votes would receive the funding. And the lottery veto mechanism instead, basically all the proposals were immediately entered into the lottery unless they received a veto from one of the other participants. And each participant could only veto 1 proposal. So we're not going to discuss so deeply the process and the outcomes, but we recently gave some presentations at the DAO Artwork Prototype Series at Goethe and at the Money Lab in Berlin. So you can go and check those self-promotions for more details on the process. But some of the findings that were really interesting, I guess, was first of all, there was so I should say that after the month working group, we asked our participants for feedback, and out of the feedback, the first or the strongest, I guess, feedback was on the everybody really appreciated the possibility to collaborate and create new collaborations, develop projects with new friends that hadn't really had the chance to meet before. Similarly, it was very much appreciated the possibility to socialize in a fairly regular way. Obviously, it was it was high COVID time, so we didn't really have the possibility to meet in person. It was a constraint that, however, was very generative, I guess, for the process. Everybody really appreciated the openness of the process that also opened out the possibility for friendly attack vectors or like some friendly bribing happening particularly in the emoji vote round. And it was also really interesting to test the boundaries between community and individuals, and what are the requirements of each participant or each person that participates in this collective process versus the the collective goal. Some of the questions that remain open for us are the question of documentation. That is how how each of the funding projects would need to be documented. The question of licensing, which regards also, I guess, the question of collective ownership. And then ultimately one of the biggest questions, I guess, is the question of onboarding, particularly whether ultimately we would really want to develop Black Swan on a blockchain substrate. These are some of the questions that these are extracts of some of the questions from our feedback. So again, what was liked the most about the process was the possibility to collaborate, the emergence of organic processes within the working group itself. Like in the proposal phase, immediately someone created a notepad so that people could organize, on a common chat, on a common document about the different proposals. Someone created a skills pool where basically people could write their interests, the skills, the things that they would like to learn more, perhaps, and begin to form partnerships or collaboration with each other. And the big learning, the possibility of being really at the origin of this process, and learn together about these different mechanisms. What was like the least, it was, again, here we see the tension between the collective and the individual, the fact that some of the processes were not anonymous, particularly within Discord, kind of led to, or made some people feel like a bit uncomfortable. Someone saw their proposal being vetoed, which definitely is not, I guess, very nice, a very nice thing. I guess that was also due to the fact that Discord, we really wanted to try and use a current platform rather than create an entirely new system and leverage the type of platform like Discord, where the trust community already organizes. And someone also noticed that there may have been unvoiced thoughts that may have gone lost in the group meeting setting, and that certainly has to do again with the affordances of the platform. Now, this is quite telling of how each voting mechanism make people feel. Quadratic voting won absolutely. The emoji vote was kind of like a bit mediocre. I guess some of the feedback on the emoji vote was that was less because it's a very public and also quite nuanceless. People couldn't really express their preferences for different proposals in a very granular way. Obviously, it's very much yes or no kind of mechanism. But it definitely wasn't the most appreciated for that reason. The lottery vote was, on the other hand, the most polarizing because the project that won the lottery was ultimately a project that some people said that had considered vetoing previously, but didn't, also in view of the non-private form of the voting. And so it kind of caused a little bit of it wasn't particularly appreciated. I guess that could also go back to the fact that perhaps the organization or collaboration doesn't really want too much contingency in the process, whereas the lottery vote is very much based, or leveraging in the sense that contingency. And similarly, the outcome of the voting reflected, I guess, how people felt about them. Everyone at least was okay with the results, but only one person really loved the results altogether of the voting. And this is one of the first outcomes of our month-long working group by Pargang and Chiara Di Leone. This is a project that won the Quadratic voting round, which surprisingly won with the majority of the voice credits and the effective votes. And this is a speculative storytelling about about making your own CO2 absorbing algae machine. And now we can move to Signet. So I guess, so out of the results of our working group, we started prototyping Signet. And the idea was to create a quadratic voting interface that would make QV and generally, I guess, the whole governance process playful and more engaging and inspiring than current GovTech offerings. But so before we dive into Signet, we kind of want to show some of the DAOs and DAO interfaces that we've tested in this time, to kind of give a bit of a different, show the what's currently available and the previous, and then ultimately what we came up with. So this is a Aragon DAO interface, which is what, as Cem called it before, this like Microsoft 96 kind of aesthetic. It feels like quite bureaucratic. It's very heavy. It feels very much like a gray media in that sense. And then we also tested the DAO House interface, which is compared to, say, the Aragon ones. These are a lot more, gamey, and it's very modular and customizable, but it remains quite unclear, or it requires, in any case, a certain familiarity with how DAO operates, or how Callum said the other day, you need a bit of familiarity with this to need which parts you can ignore, basically. And then we come to Signet. And so shall I just show a bit of our interfaces that Leith created, which may be in this Zoom as well. Shall we go through each of the pages first? Okay, so this is our landing page, like how you enter Signet. And it's based on the lunar cycle compared to other, instead of having traditional, voting rounds, we thought of, creating a bit of a, give a different temporality perhaps, or connecting the cycle of the voting with a more expansive, perhaps, way of thinking or conceiving of cycles. And this is the overview page, where basically you can see here different proposals. On the left, in the middle, this is in the middle is basically will be a slider where people can express their preferences positively and negatively. with regards to each of the proposals. And unfortunately, because I have Zoom overlapping my screen, I can't exactly see everything in the in the screen. But and this is instead each proposals page where basically people will be able to look into the details of every specific proposals, and also in this page vote. Do we want
to go back to the overview page?
Yeah.
Something that really emerged out of the working group was this insight that while people really liked the affordances of quadratic voting and how it enabled this more granular articulation of preference, they didn't understand how it was working. And we felt that for any kind of politically angled interface, it's important that the details aren't hidden away in black box, but the user has the ability to understand how things are working. And so we really wanted to make the relationship between voice credits and the effective vote tangible and visible. And so in the center, you see this slider where you'd be able to distribute your voice credits. And then in the bar on the right, which this is kind of an empty screen right now, you'll get different energy bars that will show you how powerful your vote is. So where it says 0 on the far right of the screen, you'll have the calculation of the effective vote. And when you mouse over the 0, you'll have a little square root symbol to give some indication of what's going on. But yeah, we also looked at this quadratic voting interface from Gitcoin, and they hide away voice credits entirely. I guess it's kind of the opposite of what Culture Stake is doing, where they're hiding away effective votes. And while we wanted to make it easy to understand, we still wanted to have all the information there for people to have access to. I see a hand being raised. Maybe it's not a
question from Ule. I don't know if you want to take it now or just after you're done.
Now,
well, this was not on purpose at all. So sorry for that.
Hello. Yeah.
This is, I guess, one of the next steps, I guess, for us is answering the question, where does the money come from? Which I guess is a question that connects also us together here with the sphere, with the ecology, the funding. And this is a sketch of the Black Swan Commune, which is something we've been thinking about, inspired by the idea of the venture commune of the Telecommunist Manifesto, but basically an idea for Black Swan to become a meta-DAO, if you will, or a kind of virtual organization that could connect different existing communities, such as trust or creative communities of creative practitioners, so that they can share resources in a more efficient way and find a way to ideally collectively raise funds. We haven't answered that many questions. You can see that at the top, you can see like NFTs and tokens. These are, again, open questions for us that I guess relate also with to the question of onboarding. Onboarding people into a Web3 ecosystem entirely, require, I guess, also a certain care for the process. And I guess, and then we are also working on or like thinking about royalties and revenue sharing for artists. And there is an upcoming project that maybe, Callum, you would like to say a couple of words about.
we had been in conversation with the performance artist Billy Bouthiel for the last 8 months or so around ways of thinking about sharing the value created by collective artworks or artworks that just involve many different people playing different roles in them. And initially we were thinking towards different types of contracts that could be used in an off-chain way. More recently, an opportunity came around for Billy to mint several performances as NFTs. And so now we have been testing and thinking through different redistribution mechanisms and trying to map out the pros and cons of different ways of thinking about sharing the royalties, whether that's just a revenue split or whether we set up a DAO, whether we use a multi-sig wallet. So these have kind of all come into the testing that we've done. And maybe just a quick point on what connects all of the different parts that Laura was talking about is, I think, as articulated by Penny at the beginning, this need for artists to have access to new ways of working together and new ways of pooling the value they create and owning the value they create. And so Black Swan is very much an ongoing research project that thinks about arts organizing in a modular way. So it's not about trying to create a solution for all problems, but rather thinking about how some groups will want a signaling app. So Signet kind of enables decision making, whereas other artists might not need decision making, but are more interested in revenue sharing. So how can we have these modules that can work independently of each other? This also is an insight that comes out of testing all of these existing DAO tools. Is they're very heavy. You kind of have everything. You have to know what to ignore, as Laura was saying. So how can we kind of like make it very easy for people who aren't so familiar with Web3 to engage with some of the ways it enables value to be redistributed?
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I have a particular question about the seemingly the second round of experimentation you're going to be doing around revenue sharing. Is that going to be a similar type of activity to the governance experiment that you guys have been running?
There's more at stake in it because these are NFTs that will be sold. We've been engaging with it in a more playful way for the last month and a half, but this research will be more around what happens after we've set up this infrastructure. How do artists respond to the requirements of the tool? So that's more what we want to study now, is like in regards to the revenue sharing, is how do we onboard people who have never used Web3? How do we make sure that everybody feels in control of their share of the funds? Yeah, so this is more the research in this project, though it will continue beyond it, I think.
I see. The reason I ask is because I really appreciate the experimentation coming before the tool itself, because that gives the playfulness and the sort of the capability to look around corners. And yeah, I was just wondering, how are you going to, replicate that model? How are you going to enable different avenues to be tested in this particular case where you have, let's say, one NFT sold, and once it's distributed, it's hard to sort of, like you said, it's a more of an empirical experiment this time. So just curious about your experiment design there.
So it's also definitely just one small portion of our overall.
Benim toplantı değil de, iş toplantısı değil de.
Bartucuğum, put yourself on mute, please.
Sorry.
But yeah, this is just kind of the beginning of our experimentation into revenue sharing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I very much appreciate the way you're handling the experimentation part, and Lara, what you said about using blockchain as a tool for imagining new types of organizing. I mean, this is something that we've been sharing in common for a while. I was curious to maybe hear a little bit more. Why? I mean, almost playing the journalist position here. Like, why is blockchain stimulating new imaginary for organizing? What is it that you guys feel is stimulating? Like Penny was mentioning at the beginning, removing the gatekeeper of the art world, for instance. How is blockchain allowing to do that and maybe if you can add also a little something on venture communist, the venture communism, what's their name again? You mentioned them earlier on, which I'm also very interested in knowing a little bit more, because we have very aligned perspectives here, like how to activate a new type of commons. That's what I hear also in how you're describing the project, and you're developing tools to do that. I love the honesty with which you say, hey, there's a culture information here. You know, it's not like you can just throw people in and they know immediately how to deploy these tools. So I think the experiment you did is so useful for others around in the ecosystem, and that's really something I appreciate. So yeah, if you can address that a little bit, I'd be I'd be grateful.
Maybe I can take the first part, and Laura, you take the second. I think that why it's so interesting to look through blockchain technology is that really, I think one of the main points of art is to, in a sense, like we must not reduce society to economy and capitalism. In fact, we must refuse to do that. And when we find new tools that are purely being publicly pushed as only useful for the extension and acceleration of the things that ultimately extract and oppress us, I think we need to begin to rewrite the stories and the mythologies around that. And I think that's also very much the reason why artists, performers, thinkers, the general public should very much be in these conversations, because when you begin to think through these new worlds, I would say, I wouldn't even say tools, because actually what they open to us is completely new environments that we actually have the ability to craft. And I think that's really important to be able to move on and really register that quite a lot of the world that we live in doesn't really work for us anymore. And I think that really one of the most useful things about art is about being able to utilize culture in opening conversations and mutations and forks, and in a way building on things like the blockchain and showing its adaptability and how it can be repurposed. Laura, do you want to cover Venture Commune?
Yeah, I can say a few words about it. Like, we got really inspired by the idea of the Banister Commune by the Telecommunisten Manifesto. And the idea basically that they propose is a co-op of co-ops, essentially. Again, the idea of a virtual organization that facilitate coordination for the cooperative, for the organizations that are member of this larger meta organization, basically. And the original proposal for the this is us. The original proposal for the venture commune is actually targeting specifically that type of immaterial labor that, however, is very easily it's a type of targets a type of immaterial production that, however, requires this to be sellable, sold in a traditional economic sense. And so it works particularly well for software design, these type of activities that, yes, obviously leverage a lot of immaterial knowledge or knowledge production, if you will, the knowledge economy, but on the other hand have a are quite easily are quite easy to deploy within the traditional economy. So this is where we see the I guess the main difference between the original idea of the venture commune that works really well for this type of activities, and obviously it also deploys copyleft and ideas of common ownership that are very interesting for us. But the problem that this is where I guess we differentiate with the co-op is how to ideally get funds or sources of funds for the practitioners without having to rely on these traditional models. I should also say that the venture commune original idea works according to the idea of basically rent sharing. So the idea, what we see at the top between the Blackstone's commune and the external economy, in the original proposal, that's where you would have like bonds that the commune would sell to external investor, and that would benefit from receiving a basically a constant return that comes from the rents of the various organizations that are part of the co-op. Clearly, this doesn't really work well in the case of entirely digital economies that don't really have even that much rent, or it wouldn't, the value proposition for external investor will need to be very different than the original model. And that's what we are currently working on or thinking about. And that's where we see maybe also, a place for NFTs or different blockchain, blockchain-based kind of objects, magical objects. That could create a provide a new opening up new funding opportunities, funding streams for creative activities.
I don't know if there are other questions. Joel, that's great.
I'd like to ask one. That was great. Thank you so much, folks. I was really struck by the attack vectors part and the friendly bribe, and I just wondered if you might say a bit more about what you learned from that, or what, especially around the mechanism, like what parts of the mechanism did you think produced the friendly bribe scenario, and in what intensity, and kind of do you have mechanism thoughts going forward for that? So I think that does a lot in terms of a motor of talk about immaterial labor, right? Just anyway, if that's enough of a question, do you think? Okay.
Thank you, Joel. Well, I don't know, anyone wants to take this question, or I can begin. I guess the bribing really occurred in the emoji vote. because the one thing about quadratic voting is that because it's so distributed, it kind of prevented the possibility itself. But I guess embedded in the affordances of the one person, one vote mechanism, there is also the affordances of try and convince people through off-chain mechanism to vote for each other or create back channels of coordination. Let's say it was yeah, I mean, obviously it was, everything was very much in the spirit of the playfulness of the working group. So it wasn't I guess terrible thing, but I guess it was nice even within such a small group to see the different mechanism, like can give rise to certain dynamics. There is this great quote by J.J. Gibson that introduced the concept of affordances. It said something like a cliff affords falling. So I guess similarly, the one person, one vote emoji kind of method afforded also the possibility to, for other people to try and, like attack, in a sense, the system.
I think also it was a particular feature of us testing 3 different voting mechanisms. Our next step would be prototyping Signet within the Trust community, which has about 300 people on Discord, and seeing, what new attack vectors are there maybe, or like, how does this tool shape the proposals, or do we learn anything through that? Here, the bribing was very specifically around voice credits in exchange for emoji votes. So it was this like using one voting mechanism to try and achieve a certain outcome of a different voting mechanism. Maybe also then reflecting on the value of the lottery, and that it somehow could, like without a veto, a lottery could maybe also offer a different way of providing opportunities. So yeah, maybe more a feature of testing these 3.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, super interesting. Maybe we have more time at the end of the day for opening up other dimensions, and maybe also connect. I was thinking with the first presentation by Beth, because of the, like, around the idea of like what type of organization can we start imagining based on the type of tools that NeoSafe is developing, and you guys are proposing one scenario. And I'm personally very much curious to activate the collective brain around these issues. There's some conspirational air. Like I have the Staatskunst question in mind basically, but that maybe is for the last session. Thanks a lot, Callum, Lara, Penny. Hope you're going to stay for the next presentation. We have Alexandre Roussel, directly from Rennes, I imagine, in France.